there's a lot of, over the last 2 days, there's a lot of complaints out there about especially live YouTube.
Okay, we are recording and we are live on YouTube. You can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. All right. So we'll go to the consent agenda. First of all, to the public, we apologize for the last hour's delay. We could not get you guys into the meeting. So we went to executive session to start our business there, and then now we're back. So sorry for making you hang out listening to whatever you were listening to. The consent agenda, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
All right, is there anything anyone wants to discuss, take out of the consent agenda?
Yes, Perry, that one I mentioned to you earlier.
That number 8?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so we'll pull, does
I'd like
anybody?
to- Yes, I'd like to take out take B4 off the school calendar. Approve school
Okay.
calendar.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, so the number 4 and number 8, number 4 approved the 2021-22 school calendar, and number 8 approve employee medical evaluation. Those have been pulled. Do we have anything else? Any other questions? All right, do I have a motion to approve? Oh, I
I'll
already
make
did
a
that.
motion. Yeah, you did.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any against? Okay. All right, so why don't we then hit the school calendar? John, you want to get started?
Yeah, so I had some questions that of the superintendent, and I just want to understand a little, it sometimes takes a little time to go back and forth here. How many days do we have at the end of the year for PD? There was some sort of days allocated at the end of the year, I believe, which was going to help us get going for the following year. How many days was that?
So for regulation purposes, and Brian and Caroline helped me with this, is 180 days. So students have to there are 180 days for students minus 4 days that are given by the state for superintendent days. So a total of 176 days for students.
I'm asking about how many professional development days were we going to be doing in June?
Oh, for the last week, we're proposing the 21st to the 24th half days, and the 25th would be a superintendent conference day. And we're able to do this through an instructional waiver that we were granted this year and last year. We just didn't use it last year, but we used it. We would like to use it for this year, just for schooling loss and trauma, and providing that professional development for those two purposes and more.
So to size the amount of work, the amount of professional development you're doing for those 4 half days, I don't know what you're using the superintendent conference days for this year, and with 1 day this year, and the days 4 days next year. But I assume there's probably something in there about professional development. I guess, do you actually have a program planned out for all that time that you needed to take another 2 half days of student time for?
Absolutely. We have so much work to do, and Caroline, I don't know, want to speak to the plans that you're constructing for our staff.
It's just usually, I'm okay with things, but it just, I just have a thing where I want as much student instruction time as possible. And I know adults need things, and there's good things that can help with that. Just want to be convinced it seems like we have quite a bit of PD planned already, such that we really need another 2.5 days, two half days.
Well, actually, this year we front loaded all of our conference days because we were going into sort of unknown territory with the online instruction, the virtual, learning.
Yeah.
So we front loaded all of those opportunities. So we really haven't had any set aside time throughout the year. Everything that's been done has been done embedded in a teacher workday. Somewhat, piecemeal while buildings are working on their prep times, during their collaboration times, department meetings, faculty meetings. What we have planned for the end of the year is really to get a jump start on a couple of things with special education. One thing is that we'll have trainers from PNW BOCES working with our special education teachers and their collaborative co-teachers to learn what effective co-teaching models look like. They do know this, most of them are using them, but it's good to have a refresher and also have time to start looking at what that co-planning really looks like in order to incorporate 6 models of co-teaching in the instructional process. We're also going to be starting explicit training in the UDL, which is the Universal Design for Instruction for Learning. And that is most targeted at our teachers of special education programming, but it's also for all folks who are instructing students. It's really the best way to be able to differentiate and to be able to provide access to the curriculum for students who struggle, also while challenging students in the classroom who need to be pushed and challenged because they have exceptional abilities as well. So that's some of the stuff. We'll also, I'm seeking partnership with Ramapo for Children because they have trauma-informed instruction training. And also I know that Rick Keller-Coffey was here earlier in the a couple of months ago. So Brian had reached out to him for training for some of our non-instructional staff. And I'd also like him to provide his, protecting against child abuse for the instructional staff as well. So we will start the fall with a typical superintendent's conference day, and we will have when that comes for 24 of our teachers, we will have training in classroom level Orton Gillingham training for 24 of our staff members. So that will be primarily the elementary school as well as some of our special educators and reading teachers. That is a multisensory reading program. So to be able to offer that classroom level training throughout the fall, starting with the first superintendent's conference day is really going to be an amazing opportunity, but we need to be able to front load some of this training to this year because we've missed out on it for this year.
And thus the remaining superintendent conference days and the 2 days in question, they're planned out for PD?
Yep.
And which is essential.
Yes.
All right, look, I'm not here to dispute anything. I just, it was curious to me, so I'll let it go.
Well, I mean, so is this basically, the plan going forward is that there'll be this many PD days every year?
It wouldn't be allowed as per the calendar because there's a hours requirement, as well as school days requirement, whereas this year the hours have been waived. We do still have to have the 180 school days, but it doesn't cite specifically how long those days have to be.
Okay.
And it seems like good training. It just seems like bad timing because you're going to be learning a lot that you can't implement for 2 months.
Except that we do offer summer mini grants that teachers can engage in order for them to plan for the use of this in the fall. So it's kind of a nice time to get ahead of that with some of this new learning or refresher so that they can spend time with a colleague, like a co-taught teaching pair, where they would be able to put some of this into practice.
Okay. Any other questions about this, comments? I guess we have to, yeah, do I have a motion to approve the 21-22 school calendar?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Hello? Anybody muted?
I'll second if nobody's going to jump in.
Thanks, Howard. All right, any other questions about it?
Can I ask one? I just happened to notice the Juneteenth holiday, is that a state mandated holiday now or federal or?
So for this year, the state
It was on a
has,
Saturday this year, right?
yeah. So
Yeah.
the state is not, they're not planning any regents exams. And Brian and Laura, please, if you remember the exact wording better than I do, please jump in. They're not planning any regents exams for the 18th for districts who are going to observe it. So there's no penalty if you take off for it. There's also no requirement. If there is a school day on the 18th, that can count towards one of your 180.
So because the 18th is a Saturday.
Correct. So
And
if it
then-
happened on a Sunday, it would be observed on the Monday, but because it's Saturday, there's no current requirement to observe it.
Wait, it is on. It is on a no, it is a Saturday. You're right. Okay. So that's why they get Monday off.
No state mechanism for a Saturday to go to an observation on a Friday, but it did, the regulation did say that if the holiday fell on a Sunday, then it would be, the Monday would be off. And moving forward, it is a state, not a federal holiday. It's a state holiday that we will have off each year unless something changes.
Okay, right. I was thinking 18th, that's a Saturday, but the 19th is, okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any against? Okay. All right, and then number 8, did you want to, should we take that into executive session?
Yes, I think we're going to have to.
Okay, so we'll postpone that. All right, section C, no correspondence, leadership reports. Other than, I think we finally have, although I think I need to go in and change one of the dates. I think super eval is, is actually working, for, at least from my ID. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to, knock out the ones we don't need. But it appears to be working because it's already telling me we're late for that first date, which I had was today.
Well, the committee went over it yesterday, Perry. We knocked out the ones that we didn't need, but I don't know if Laura got a chance to delete, if we deleted them yet, but we discussed it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we moved everything out a week, so we're okay. I just didn't update super eval with that week. But that was all I have. Howard, do you have anything?
No, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Okay. Superintendent report.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all. I have lots to share. Starting out with our shout outs, I wanted to shout out our principal Lipka and his team for hosting a Frisbee golf event. It sort of felt like a normal evening outside with families. So it's so nice to see families enjoying each other and enjoying the good weather. High fives to Principal Mike and Mike Ragusa and his team. They worked with the Millbrook Landscaping and Gardens in redesigning some of L's planting areas located at the front main entrance. So the new additions are just beautiful. So stop by and look at them. And it's so welcoming and bright. A big thank you to our PTO for celebrating the entire staff here at the Millbrook Central School District. They gave us all goodie bags, chock filled with water and candy and cookies and hand sanitizer and all of that good stuff. So it was just really thoughtful, delicious, and very much appreciated. So thank you, PTO. A round of applause to our Cheryl Sprague, our district clerk, who has been tirelessly working, planning and setting up the polls for the budget. There's a lot of behind the scenes work that nobody sees, and that's why it looks so seamless in the front of the house. So thank you, Cheryl. And a big thank you to our community for coming out to vote. And lastly, today we had a lockout today. We were alerted by the police of some police activity that was off campus, and it was recommended that we call a lockdown. We followed their recommendation and communicated with families and the buildings. And I just wanted to commend and thank the state police for alerting us and Deputy Freer and the leadership team for jumping into action and keeping things cool, calm, and collected within our buildings. This is how we keep our district and everybody in it safe. So thank you very much for that partnership and for that quick action on everybody's part. Events updates. We have our National Honor Society induction ceremony, and that's on May 25th. June 4th, we have Field Day at Elm in Alden. June 4th, we have the high school prom. June 9th, we have the high school spring concert, senior recital, and drama production. June 10th, we have the grade 6 parent orientation. That's a virtual one at 6:30. June 15th is our second grade orientation. June 16th is our National Junior Honor Society induction ceremony. June 23rd is moving up ceremony at Alden. It's on the side lawn outside. June 24th is a middle school moving up ceremony, and that's up at the football field. And then we have our graduation, June 25th, and that's also at the football field. There are rain dates, but we're hoping for clear skies and temperate weather. And I'm seeing everybody out there who can make it. So I feel like we're moving again towards normalcy. The future here is looking a little brighter and more manageable. And I think we're all sort of trying to have sighs of relief that we're out to see one another face to face. And almost tomorrow, I believe it's no masks, but we still are wearing masks and social distancing in schools. Just a reminder that MEF has the Taste to Go event on June 5th at the Millbrook Winery. Here's a few details about it. For $100, you can get 2 bottles of wine, choose from 4 options. You get a bottle opener, glasses, discard card for local businesses, and a tote. And 80 lucky individuals will also get a $50 gift card to a local Millbrook business. Those that purchase a tote will be asked to select a pickup time. And just a reminder, the Taste to Go event provides funds for the Millbrook Educational Foundation to support the Millbrook School District. They've done so many wonderful things for us. Each year, MEF provides grant money for fun projects, supplies, or extracurricular activities that help enrich student experience. So get out there and get your tote and support MEF because they're supporting us and our kids. I wanted to give the board an equity update, just making sure that it's on your radar and you're moving along as in the process as we're moving along. So here's a lot of information, but I just want to share it with you. We're in the process of exploratory and data collection, and it's multi-layered and multi-leveled. So as I shared in an earlier board meeting, we are a member of the First Equity Consortium in Dutchess County. BOCES assisted in creating this consortium with Education Elements leading the way. Our partners in the work include Red Hook and Dutchess County BOCES. As a reminder, when Education Element partners with a district, it goes through 5 phases of equity work, which includes inventory, where the firm learns as much as it can about our district. The other phases that follow are connect, include, create, and action. Our work at this time is primarily focused on culture and academics. At this time, we have completed part 1 and part 2 of our inventory phase. Part 1 required the equity leadership team made up of Caroline, Elliot, Brian, our principals, and myself to complete our own individual leadership equity inventory. This inventory was designed to highlight possible blind spots for leadership, such as the recognition of systemic barriers impacted marginalized students. Using the inventory results, Education Elements provided each of us with a leader equity lens readout to review, reflect, and discuss. During part 2 of the inventory phase, each leader identified 5 to 8 stakeholders to complete a survey. The purpose of this survey was to collect feedback and reflections on how we lead the leadership team for equity around awareness, strengths, opportunities to create inclusive and equitable outcomes. These results were layered over the readouts from part 1 and were shared with us just yesterday during a stakeholder leadership analysis session with Education Elements. This analysis will need to continue as there is much to consider and make sense of. During this session, we also started to draft our Millbrook vision and mission statement for equity. We also have a group of staff members who have been tasked with collecting data and artifacts, such as free and reduced lunch numbers, demographics for each building, AP offerings, grading policies, code of conduct, etc., to better understand the systems at work within the Millbrook Central School District that influence academics and culture. Our next step is to send out equity surveys to students, parents, and staff. So once we have collected all of this data and analyzed it, we will begin to build an equity roadmap for our district. I think this is exciting work. It makes us vulnerable, thoughtful, reflective, a little uncomfortable. Healthy, uncomfortable conversations are happening, all in the name of creating an educational system where all children will thrive. So there's a lot of work that's happening behind the scenes. And once we're able to sort of, again, analyze all this data and sort of draft that roadmap, we'll be sure to come back to the board with this information and, of course, welcome your feedback and your ideas. This is a collective approach. We want to make sure that we're inclusive and that everybody has a voice in this process, because it's for all. It's for all of our children. It's for our community. So again, as we move along, we'll keep you apprised of everything, of our progress. The calendar change, we talked a little bit about it when we were with John and his questions earlier. So just to review, due to the instructional waiver that we were granted for this year and last year, we'd like to propose half days for students between June 21 and June 24, and a superintendent conference day on the 25th. This will allow Caroline and principals to schedule training and planning time while the full staff is in session in preparation for next year. And Caroline talked about the plans, the professional development support that our teachers and our staff need and will benefit our children. And I want to make sure that people know it's not that we don't want to see our children in this building. We love our kids. They're wonderful. Our families are great, but we do need this time to gather together as a staff and reinvigorate and remind and teach each other and learn from others so that we're stronger when we hit the ground in September. And does anybody have any questions about anything that I shared out? Well, that's all I have to report. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. All right. Next is, where are we? Special ed and truancy reports.
Elliot, can you put the continuum of services up first?
You got it. Posting now.
Oops.
Okay, so this is an overview that was requested on general education and special education and the continuum. So I did receive a few questions today since this was on the agenda. So I'm going to do my best to incorporate all of those questions within the presentation. If I miss anything, I will certainly follow up tomorrow via email or a phone call to those folks who have provided them. So again, this is an overview. Elliot, if you can just give me the next slide. So I was asked to sort of walk through the processes and the differences between 504s and IEPs. So under IDEA, you're talking generally about IEP, individualized education plans, and that's for students with disabilities served in our special education program. When you're speaking about 504, you're generally speaking about the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. Elliot, next. So to highlight some of the differences, I have this chart here. So 504 is a civil rights law. It prohibits a discrimination on the basis of disability, whereas IDEA is a federal law, and that governs the federal law that governs it, and it's also federally funded. So 504 has no age limits. It can follow a person into adulthood to access. And whereas IDEA is generally for preschool students and school age students. So there's less specific regulations about timeframes, parental participation, and paperwork requirements for 504. In fact, the regulation that outlines 504 process is very, very thin, whereas under IDEA is very voluminous. The regulations part 200 and 201. So IDEA carries specific timelines for an initial evaluation, program creation, and program sustaining programs. And one of the differences as well is there's 13 specific qualifying disabilities under IDEA, and any disability that limits one or more life functions, significantly limits one or more life functions, may be appropriate for a plan under 504. That disability can be real or perceived disability. So that's something that's interesting. If a child displays behavior that's consistent with a particular disability, we can create a plan to support that child under 504 after doing an appropriate evaluation, as it's called, with regards to a variety of informational resources. Elliot, can you move forward one? So that evaluation can be drawn on a variety of informational sources in order to create an appropriate plan to support that child. While with IDEA, it requires very specific evaluations, a cognitive evaluation, an educational achievement evaluation, a social history provided by the parent, a medical records review, and also classroom observation. So 504 requires a quote unquote periodic evaluation, not very specific, whereas special education requires a triennial evaluation and an annual review of the plan. To be clear, most districts, so that they can be certain to meet the needs of the periodic evaluation and make sure that 504 plans stay updated and appropriate, generally speaking, they will still use an annual review of the plan just so that they maintain those timelines and review. Though it isn't required to do it annually, it is a best practice. And also with both 504 and IEPs, it would be appropriate that we would review the plan anytime a member of the team or the parent requests a review. Under 504, there is no independent evaluation. Under IDEA, however, there is a mechanism. If a parent disagrees with an evaluation provided by the district, there is a mechanism for a parent to request an individual evaluation, independent evaluation. So the 504s require a reevaluation before a specific change in placement, whereas there is no such requirement for a change in placement under IDEA. Parental consent is not required, but proper parental notification is under 504. However, under IDEA, it requires the specific consent of the parent in order to have a plan in place for a child. Next, Elliot. So 504 requires a plan. Some people kind of say in jest, it doesn't even have to be a written down plan. Obviously, it would be a best practice to be a written plan. Whereas specific requirements of an IEP fall under IDEA for students with disabilities under IDEA. So when you're talking about appropriate instruction or appropriate education under 504, you're talking about an education that's comparable to non-disabled peers. Whereas under IDEA, it must provide an educational benefit to the child. Students with disabilities that are in special education programs may have a combination of general and special education settings. We will review the continuum in just a moment. So there may be special education services that are provided to a child in the general education setting and special education setting, whereas 504s are most often in the general education classroom. Both of these plans can include related services. So that's like your speech, physical therapy, occupational therapy, counseling, that kind of thing. Next.
Caroline?
Yes.
I just have a quick question for you. How often are teachers informed and reminded of their students' IEPs? Because I'm sure on a regular basis, a different IEP changes. So how often are teachers reminded and told what changes there were and what should be expected?
So this was actually a question that came up from a parent a few weeks ago. So every year, just so you are aware, in the very beginning of the school year, teachers will sign off, actually teachers and any service providers will sign off that they have had access to review the child's IEP, either electronically or in print, and that they've had an opportunity to ask the case manager any questions that they may have about it. And then, so there were different practices in each of our buildings for who updates that information after a requested review meeting. And we've just most recently had some conversations with the psychologist, and we have a meeting this coming Monday to flesh out a process more specifically so that no information falls through the cracks. It's typically the job of the case manager to get that information out. And in some cases, when the psychologists in the building were the chairpersons, they had done that. But we are going to be streamlining all of our processes and making sure that there's no question whose responsibility that is.
When is all that streamlining scheduled to complete?
Yeah, we have a meeting on Monday, the 24th, to review all of it. So I've created a guidance document, which has gone out to the service providers and teachers. It has, information about whose responsibility each portion of the IEP is, and also for notification. And then on Monday, the 24th, we'll be meeting to review it in person in a department meeting.
Okay, I mean, it's, and my understanding of the process is weak, to say the least, but it seems like it's a very complicated process, both timing wise and communication wise, as well as, of course, the educational piece. Does it go through like a regular review of how can we make this better? And I don't just mean like, make sure you send your email to all the people. I mean, if there's something that we can do, if the IEP, and again, I don't know if this is possible, but if the document can be can be tagged so that it has reminders in it for people, so that, I mean, teachers have a ton of stuff on their plates. Maybe they need a periodic reminder. I'm sort of guessing or making it up, but don't just try to, as you look to optimize this process, look at what other other districts are doing. If there's something that we could do to make that more efficient, in general.
Yeah,
I think the software IEP Direct, Caroline, that's pretty much has a lot of those tools and makes us have the ability to do what Perry's describing, or not?
Some of it you can look on, there's like a dashboard that tells you IEPs that are in progress and whatnot. But as far as pushing, I'm not aware of a mechanism for pushing out reminders to the service providers. It's usually my office, Paige, myself, the chairs. We're pushing out the reminders to get portions of the IEP updated.
Mhm.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not questioning, and I'm just throwing these out as like hypothetical examples, but if there's something that you need to really, to help you streamline this process and make it easier on the students, the parents, and the teachers, we should know that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. So as feedback is coming forward, and I appreciate feedback, as feedback is coming forward, I have been creating like a guidance document that has already been shared with the service providers. We will be meeting about it specifically on Monday. We've been creating systems in my office to attempt to streamline processes. When there's a meeting that's held, we have, a calendar that sort of helps us to drive when those reminders need to go out, because we need to have an IEP finalized, et cetera. So we're working on it as things come up. I think I needed to live in the position a little bit and see where the sort of like pitfalls were. And I'm building systems now or have been building systems, but continue to do so. This pandemic was very, very difficult. For a million reasons. A lot of timelines got delayed because we didn't have access to students. So a lot of things were backlogged into, the fall this year, and even right into annual reviews. So there was some things that made this a very, very challenging past 18 months or so. So, but as we find things that need to be improved upon, we are looking for systems within my office to be able to do that. And part of Monday will also be collaborating with the teachers to kind of hear what kind of supports that they need as well. So just to continue with the process, and feel free to interrupt me, when a parent makes a request for an evaluation explaining their need and other interventions that have been put in place, a principal can review with that parent the building level interventions and programs for a student, and a parent can opt to use, say, the RTI process or continue with the evaluation. And again, that evaluation includes the cognitive academic testing, social history, classroom observation, and medical health record review. And when we receive consent for evaluation from a parent for the initial, it's a 60-day consent from consent when we have to return the eligibility determination for the student as to whether they qualify as a student with a disability, and a program would then be created, or if they don't, and if they don't qualify under IDEA, it would often be the practice where we would look and see if they qualify and require a 504 for support. Elliot, next slide rather. So in the case of multi-tiered systems of support, this is one of the other ways that students get referred for the CSE for services. The multi-tiered systems of support is basically a 3-tier model that's implemented to assist a child who may not be achieving on grade level, and that could be academically, behaviorally, or some models also include attendance. So it may require that that student be reviewed and that a plan be put in place, essentially interventions be put in place to see how the child responds. If you can click one slide forward, academic MTSS, multi-tiered system of support, is generally known as response to intervention, and it was designed to help prevent students from needing the special education assistance. And what I mean by that is this is when a specific targeted intervention is put in place for a period of time and progress monitored in order to see how that child responds. If the child responds by making steady progress, then the intervention may be persisted, an intervention may be modified, another intervention may be added if appropriate. But as long as that child is trending upward and making adequate progress, we wouldn't necessarily move them forward in the RTI process. So this is the pyramid that's most often associated with RTI, and they always talk about growing the green. So the Universal Instructional Program, or Tier 1, is the primary level of preventional program. So that's your universal instruction, or core curriculum as it's often called. And this should meet the needs of about 80 to 85% of our students. When your Tier 1 program is strong, using research-based methods, generally speaking, 80% of your students should be able to benefit from that. Elliot, do you want to go forward just one slide? Thank you. So in the primary level, or Tier 1, that occurs within the regular classroom. All students are screened periodically. We use universal screening tools like IXL and the benchmark assessment system. And this is where we will first get our first bit of data about students. Sometimes their state test scores, any type of standardized test scores might also be a bit of information that we use. Just because a child doesn't do well on any one of these assessments or evaluations does not necessarily mean that they need the support of AIS or Tier 2, but it's definitely going to mean that we want to keep an eye on that child. So once we have that information and a targeted intervention is put into place, we're going to monitor them for no more than 8 weeks. And what we're going to do is we're going to be taking data points and again, creating that trend line. So if we look as though the student is making progress or heading up on that trend line, then we may, just continue that. But students who are not showing that adequate progress are moved into the tier 2 program. Elliot, if you want to go forward. So tier 2, they're provided with an increase in the intensity of their instruction, and that's matched with their particular needs. And that's also going to be determined by the levels of performance and their rate of progress. So this is often in a small group setting, and that's in addition to the instruction in the general education curriculum. So it's going to be a layered approach. So students who are in tier 2 also still have access to that tier 1 universal program. And a longer period of time may be required for this tier, such as 8 to 10 weeks, but it generally shouldn't exceed a full marking period. So students who show too little progress in this level, tier 2, may be referred to tier 3. At this time, tier 3 is going to be small group taught in groups of 1 to 4 students, and this will likely be on a daily basis, 5 times per week for at least a period. So a longer period of time may be required for this tier, such as 10 to 15 weeks. And it's sort of like a triple dip model where they're getting tiers 1, 2, and 3 at this point. So data is being collected during tiers 1, 2, and 3. And if the child still with this intensive intervention in a small group size with increased frequency continues to not make upward progress on their trend line, they may be sent forward to the CSE, where all of the data that has been collected through this process, may be used as additional information to create an eligibility determination. Again, it would require the consent of a parent to be able to evaluate them additionally for the CSE. One more slide. So at the beginning of the school year, the RTI committee looks at, a variety of data points to determine which students will require the support of tiers 1 or 2. And then they're required to provide tier 1 interventions for students identified as needing classroom progress monitoring. And then teachers who identify students who need intervention services will begin with those tier 1 interventions. Again, these are targeting a specific skill. They are progress monitored. And that data is collected to be able to show a trend, whether it's upward, it could be downward as the expectations change over time throughout the year, or the student could just kind of stay the same. So teachers can also consult with members of the RTI team if they need assistance in coming up with targeted interventions. And you're also going to want to be able to look at the highest leverage intervention. So you're going to look at the highest leverage skill rather to match an intervention towards, meaning that if this skill is remediated, what's going to sort of create the greatest trajectory for that student. Next one, Elliot. So when referring a student to the RTI committee, as you can see, there's some information that is required, and the reason for this is so that it's very comprehensive and that we know what's already been tried. What we don't want to do is put interventions in place that have already been tried and been unsuccessful, or have tried and have had, moderate growth, but not enough to get the student back to grade level expectations. Next, Elliot. And then the RTI team will review tier 2 interventions after the 8 to 10 week mark. And then the student can, the RTI team can plan for that student if they require more intensive, as in frequency or group size interventions as appropriate. And then the student may be referred to tier 3. In tier 3, there's progress monitoring with tracking, and a decision may be made based on the progress of the student, whether to continue towards grade level in general education or refer to the CSE for an evaluation. So this is targeted instruction that we're speaking about on an area identified as need in a small group setting. Sometimes this can even be, one-to-one. There are those occasions. General education and special education students can receive this support, and we continue to look and respond to those placements. You can use past and present data to set up appropriate interventions for student and also progress monitor That's probably the most important thing because you really need to know if the child is responding to that intervention. There's information that's sent home to parents, and there's progress reports that are sent home to parents from AIS providers as well. One of our very important programs, Elliot, next slide, I'm sorry, is our multisensory reading program. It is accessible by students in the general education and special education programs. And multisensory reading is a research-based reading and spelling curriculum or approach, you could say, for students that require such intervention. Currently, we have several teachers who are trained in the Wilson Reading Program. This year, we have had 7 of our teachers trained to the associate level from Orton Gillingham, and that means that they can provide a full classroom instruction model. They can also provide small group and one-to-one instruction as well. As mentioned, in the fall, we will have a big group. 24 of our teachers will be trained in the classroom level training by Orton Gillingham. So that's really exciting, because this is one of the programs for reading that tends to have, great success for students, and especially those students with dyslexia. So that's really great in terms of a decoding and encoding model. So this is the continuum of special education services. Once a child has qualified for services, you may notice that to the left here, it says least restrictive to most restrictive. Our goal is always to support a student in their least restrictive environment with accommodations for their educational benefit. So as you can see, something that people may lose sight of is that general education program is, always the program in the least restrictive environment for the child, where we can add accommodations and supports and support them there to their educational benefit. That would be the least restrictive special education program. Next, in intensity, I'm sorry, go back 1 second, Elliot. Next in intensity would be just a related services program. So a student who participates in general education programming for academics may very well have related services such as physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech, counseling, something like that to support them as a learner. Now you can go forward, I apologize.
Caroline, I just had a quick question for you.
Yeah.
So say you have a special ed student with IEP and they do have some general education courses. What's the protocol for the schools to, if that student starts to fall behind in, say, math or social studies or whatever it might be outside of their IEP, what's the protocol for that teacher to notify the parents? Do they leave it on the student because they're at a certain age? Or is the protocol to reach out to a parent if they do see their grades dropping in a certain subject? And I know that's this, you can almost use the same answer as a general education student, but I'm not. I'm just saying specifically for a special education student that obviously needs the extra help.
Yeah.
Is there a red flag that goes up and you meet to see if something's not working, or what's the protocol there?
Yeah, so that is definitely how it should work. Each special education, student with a disability is monitored by what's known as a case manager. So that person should be that point of contact for those teachers, that they would be able to tell the case manager, Chris is really struggling with these math concepts. It's not just this one topic, he's been struggling for a couple of weeks. And so really what I had explained before about the RTI process, so just for example, if Chris, you were a student with a disability and you had support services for like reading. So you had an academic program on your IEP for your reading, but typically in math, you had an area of strength there and you were out in the general education program. If you started to struggle in math, and sometimes students who struggle in reading will struggle in math when we get to word problems, for example, right? That math teacher should be able to target interventions in the classroom, progress monitor in that tier 1 classroom, because in that class, that child is a general education student, right? So once that happens, we're going to follow that same exact progression where they may then go to the RTI team as well. So additionally, there should be conversation if that student also needs those supports on their IEP. Because if it is a reading scenario that is now impacting another subject area, then we might want to consider that as well, because they may need supports related to their disability in that academic program.
Okay.
And
No, and
generally that conversation should go through the case manager. Sometimes it may be brought to the psychologist or the guidance counselor, and they have mechanisms for channeling that information in the appropriate area as well.
So is that information, once it's kind of channeled in the right way, is that then communicated to the parent of the IEP student? Or is that handled within the school and hopefully it's corrected?
Yeah, so it should be incumbent upon a classroom teacher who notices their child struggling to communicate with a parent, regardless of whether or not the child has a disability, because we want that partnership with our parents, right? But specifically with a student with an IEP, we cannot make any changes to that IEP without the input of the parent at the CSE meeting. So yes, the parent should absolutely be a part of that conversation.
Now, just out of curiosity, just as an overview of the special ed program, how different is it, or is it different at all based upon the building that the student is in? Like, is there any sort of flexibility from the principal end of it to change or how they do it or how they react to something? Or I'm just wondering how much flexibility they have throughout the district. Is it one central system that everyone has to follow, or is there some flexibility between buildings?
Yeah, so I can tell you that it should be bigger than even Millbrook, because it is actually outlined very clearly. The continuum of services and all special education is outlined very clearly in the regulations. So one of the things that we will be working on in those last 5 days of school is what each of those programs should look like, and why they differ from one another, and how they should differ. What is the focus of this particular program, so that everyone can have a common understanding, because it should not look different. There should not be discretion of any one person. It is a committee decision where a child is placed, and it should be based on data. It should be based, well, I'm going to get to what it should be based on in a few minutes.
Okay.
But it shouldn't be based on anyone's opinion. Okay, so next on the continuum, you have the consultant teacher models. You'll notice that consultant teacher can be direct services or indirect services. Direct services are supporting a student in the general education program, typically with push-in services or small group support. That's happening in the classroom. Indirect consultant teaching, that refers to support for the teacher. So there's a special education teacher who's providing support for the classroom teacher in adjusting the learning environment, and also being able to create some of those accommodations and supporting the student by way of that general education teacher. They're kind of bringing the special into the general education classroom, if that makes sense. Next slide, Elliot. So the consultant teacher is, it's sort of like a triangle where the student is bringing the ability and effort. The general education teacher is putting the content and tools to achieve success, and the special education teacher is providing the strategies to support the student so that they can achieve mastery of their skills or independence of their skills. Next is the ICT model, and this is, sometimes you'll hear it referred to as integrated co-teaching, sometimes you'll hear collaborative co-teaching, but generally speaking, there's a common planning time. In the majority of our school settings this year, we've had the fortunate ability of having an hour of collaboration time in each of these, in each of our buildings where teachers can work together. And this is sort of ICT is co-planning, co-instructing, and co-assessing. If you read the regs, the general education teacher and special education teacher have an equal responsibility in carrying out the IEP in a co-taught class. There should be none of those, my kids, your kids. They are all our students, and we both have the responsibility of carrying out that instruction, knowing the student, providing those supports, etc. Next, Elliot. So I do know that my predecessor had training in the models of co-teaching. Teachers also read the book Teaching in Tandem, but we will be doing a refresher of this training, like I said, in the end of this school year with the support of Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. So we do try our best to keep co-teaching teams together from year to year, so that they can earn trust between themselves, because that typically tends to be when co-teaching really is shared and you really see a lot of that team teaching. We do try to do that sometimes because of the way that the special education caseloads kind of flow through the building. We may have a larger cohort of needs, and therefore it may be more challenging to be able to do that, but that is our goal, generally speaking, and also to be able to keep the special education teacher in an area that is familiar to them. So we try not to move them, by grade level if we can avoid it, because we do want them to have that expertise as well. So some of the models of co-teaching are one teach, one assist, or one teach, one observe model. And you may see here is the one teach, one observe is the top left, where it's exactly as it says. One person is actively teaching, one person is actively observing. And there may be reasons why this is happening. It could be for like learning behaviors. You could be tracking data on a functional behavioral assessment, etc. In the one teach, one assist, it could be just that while one teacher is teaching, the other one is moving throughout the classroom and providing assistance or support to the students in the classroom. If you look there, oh, can you go back? I'm sorry. Yeah, if you look there, station teaching might be where the two teachers have a group, and there's also independent work, and they might rotate through stations. Parallel teaching might be two different differentiated lessons going on towards the same learning objective. One might be with the special education teacher, one might be with the general education teacher, but it would generally be mixed groups based on who needs what at that time. So every student in that classroom should be getting what they need, provided by one of those teachers. The alternative teaching is exactly what it is. There's two totally different things going on in the classroom, but again, it's aiming towards those same learning objectives, but we might be able to use alternative teaching when students need something different in order to be successful. So based on their management needs, they may need a different type of instruction. And this would be maybe after there's like a mini lesson that's happened, then there's a breakout into alternative teaching, and the class may then come back together. In teaming, and I've seen some really beautiful models of teaming where you really can't tell after a while who is the special education teacher and who's the content specialist. This usually happens when teams have been together a while and they kind of learn, it's sort of like a dance, how to feed off of one another in the classroom. So those are the 6 models. And again, we will have some opportunity for our co-teaching pairs to be able to do some work with this in June. Next slide. So school districts are not actually required. ICT is not a requirement on the continuum of special education services. When it does exist, there's a maximum of 12 students with IEPs, in that classroom. And also, there is a regulation suggestion, a white letter memo has gone out a few years back that no more than 50% of the co-taught class be populated with students with disabilities. And that obviously is the recommendation, but it's not enforced. For example, where we've had a scenario where we haven't had enough students who have elected to take a particular course. So maybe we had 4 students with disabilities in the classroom, but we only had 3 general education students taking a particular course. So it may be challenge to populate the rest of that. And therefore, if we are preventing the student with a disability from getting what they need, that could also be problematic. Next. So then we have our resource room. Resource room is supplementary instruction. So there's no primary instruction done in resource room. The primary instruction should occur in the regular classroom. Resource room has a 5-to-1 ratio, and it should be targeted instruction in order to meet a student's goals, specifically on their IEP. So when there is one common goal that students in that class share, there may be a whole group activity or task that they're doing to reinforce and monitor those goals. But sometimes you'll walk into a resource room and there will literally be 3 different learning opportunities going on based on the individual student's goals. It typically, next one, Elliot, thank you. So it's supposed to be systematic and targeted, and it should be based on each individual's goals. There should be supplemental materials, skills, strategies that are taught there. And it can be, like I said, whole group or one-on-one. It should not be homework help. Homework assignments can be utilized within resource room if the material for the homework assignment is appropriately targeting a student's IEP's goals. Students within the resource room should be within 36 months of one another. That is the requirement and regulation. And it's typically with students who have common needs in terms of like behaviors, and also that their academic range is relatively close to grade level or relatively close to one another. Next. So when you're talking about special class students are placed based upon similarity of academic, social, emotional, behavioral, physical, and management needs. A ratio for a special class is no greater than 15:1. Depending on the needs and the reason for a special class, you may see a 12:1 ratio, you may see an 8:1 ratio. So that's 8 students with 1 teacher and 1 paraprofessional or aide. You may see, 6:1. So the fewer students and the more adults, as the number of students goes down and the number of adults goes up in that special class program, that is considered more restrictive. So special class is the most restrictive program that school districts typically offer. So in terms of IEPs, they are to be reviewed annually. Specifically because we want to update the students' present levels of performance, their management needs. Their management needs should list their strengths as well as their needs for support, the effective management needs on their performance, and also the best practices for supporting the student should be a part of the annual review. Then annually, there should be an update on goals. And these are goals, they're measurable annual goals. So it's a goal that reasonably foreseeably the child could achieve within that 1 year. And then you're going to review the accommodations, modifications, and assistive technology that a student might need. And then the recommendation for their program. And also at the annual review, you're probably going to have a discussion about whether or not the child will need 12-month programming. And the reason why 12-month programming or extended school year services are put in place is because there has been demonstrated regression when we've had a break that will take, more than an 8-week period in the fall for the student to catch up. So that's typically how that is determined. So I think I had mentioned that I created a guidance document for the development and responsibilities of the IEP. And this is what was received by each of the teachers and the service providers. However, in their document, there's also links to quality indicators for writing each portion of this IEP. There's also reminders about whose responsibility it is to notify the tech office about assistive technology and all of those things. So who documents it in the IEP, and then who makes notification to the bus garage that there's a special transportation need. Those things are all outlined for our service providers and our teachers within. As you can see, the case manager is meant to manage the case, and they would be the primary point of contact. That case manager should be known to the parent at the beginning of the school year. Some of the students in the secondary program may see, for example, in the middle school, they may see someone for multisensory reading that isn't necessarily the same person that follows them throughout the day. So the case manager is going to want to collaborate with that person and get input so that they know at the table with the parent all of that information. In a case of multisensory reading, it could also be true that that reading teacher would be there to deliver their findings and information themselves. But either way, the special education case manager should be able to speak to all of that information. And then, so you can see where it says that there's reporting of progress. So reporting of progress is listed on the IEP, how often that progress will be reported to parents. And that is reported, that's a responsibility of the case manager to make sure that the progress report is filled out, because each portion, as you can see, is done by a particular person, and that's done at the conclusion of each marking period, and then that is sent out from the buildings. Next. So in constructing the IEP, you're looking at the present levels of performance and individual needs of the student. So this is pretty much the most important area of the IEP when you're starting the discussion, because other than if there's any new evaluations that have been done on the child, this is where it sort of outlines all of the information that you need to know. How is the child currently performing? What are they currently able to do specifically, struggling with, etc. And then you want to talk about the management needs of the student, and all of this. So as we go through all of these pieces, it's a description, detailed description of how the student is performing. It should include data. It should include levels of performance, specific strategies that are successfully used. And the reason for that is this document should sort of read very clearly what the student looks like as a learner. Granted, it's on paper, but it should be able to tell what does this child need when they're in your particular classroom. It should not be a mystery. When you read the IEP, you should understand what worked best for this child in your classroom. Next slide. As you can see, when I spoke of the quality indicators that are included in the IEP responsibilities document, it might be something like this. It's generally a link to the NICED website where it speaks about the specific part of the IEP. And then next, Elliot, to speak about the management needs and the effective management needs, you'll see here where it talks about, and this could be, you know, a bulleted list where the management need talks about the stuff that student needs in order to be able to do the work. So that's really the what. And then the how is how the student's disability affects their progress or their participation. And then what is done to support that learner in the classroom. So this is the what and the how. Moving right along. And Elliot, this is the measurable annual goals. But if you want to just skip one ahead. So goals should not restate the standard. They should be measurable, and they should talk about the essential skill related to that standard that is keeping the student from reaching this particular standard, because that's where you want to provide that support and see measurable growth. So you want to analyze the progression of the standard across grade levels. Our goal is always grade level, but there is a progression of those standards towards that grade level. And it may be true that if a student is grade levels behind, we have to pick a goal that is going to get them on that trajectory to be able to reach grade level standards. So you want to unpack the standard, and there's information on how that's done. You want to review the student expectations and how you might demonstrate the knowledge or skill of that standard, identify the strengths and challenges, and then how the student needs are linked to the general curriculum. You want to unpack that standard and create a measurable annual goal. So thinking about what would this look like in the classroom? What skill would they need to demonstrate in order to prove that they've been able to meet this standard, so to speak? And then identify the special education services, including adaptations and modifications. If you go forward, you'll see that it's what does the student do and what does the teacher do? And there's a really nice document on the next slide that shows how these should read. So this kind of puts it into a sentence. And if you're able to fill this in as you're reading your child's goal, you will understand that given a formula and known variables, the student will use the processes of rewrite, substitute, and evaluate with accuracy and maybe moderate assistance, because of course you're going to need to work through these goals with assistance before they can be done with independence. And then you're going to list the criteria. So out of four out of 5 trials, the criteria period for 4 consecutive trials, The method, meaning like how we are progress monitoring and what is our evidence. It could be teacher devised worksheets. That best practices have a mixture of like a teacher devised worksheets or like an observed and recorded activities. And you also want to have something that is standardized as well if you can. And then when do I assess? And that would be the schedule for assessment is biweekly. So you should be able to read straight across if you're plugging this in. And this should be a sentence that explains your child's goals. And then the next slide, the triennial evaluation does differ from the annual review in that when you are doing the triennial, you're going to be looking at reevaluation testing and updated reevaluation scores and interpretations to be able to add to at present levels of performance discussion, the management needs, and then it kind of flows through the same way as typical during the annual review. And this is every 3 years at a minimum, the reevaluation for the student should occur. So that is the process of special education. I did get 2 questions. They were cut off in my email, but I think that they mean, and if I am inaccurate in this, please feel free to contact me. Wouldn't IEPs be more accurate and easily followed if information such as physical histories fell on gym teachers and nurses who actually have the information instead of case managers? I'm not sure what that means. I think that it has to do with the medical history, medical records review. Shouldn't it be on the nurses? And that is who completes them. So I might be misinterpreting this question and welcome some clarification. And then
I'm wondering, Caroline, because these are the only 2 questions we have for the public question and answer are these 2. They almost sound more like someone needs a personal answer for it. I mean, you read the question. I mean, there's nothing wrong with reading the questions. I would suggest to the person that put this question in, Matthew, I'm trying to read it on my
Agnew.
phone. Agnew, sorry. That maybe it would be best to reach out to you directly, but keep going with the 2 questions. We might as well finish them, but it sounds like it might be more of a, they need help.
yeah, and that's fine too. Shouldn't the Millbrook Central School District encourage the participation of parents and guardians in their special education children's school life with open communication instead of leaving? And then it's cut off. So yes, I absolutely encourage parents to participate. Whether their child is in the special education program or general education program, I think communication is important. I can't answer the rest of the question because it's cut off on my email, so I apologize.
I think you got the important part of the question.
Okay.
Instead of solely, it basically, it says, shouldn't the Millbrook School District encourage the participation of parents and guardians in their special education children's school life with open communications instead of leaving it solely placed on the shoulders of the professionals? Then
Caroline, I think that's something, and parents in the special education world has probably heard a few times, leaving it to the professionals. And and that's just, I'm just throwing it out there of what I think the perception is there. But a lot of parents do want to be involved more. That's what I hear. They want to be, in the know as far as the, how the children are progressing. Because a lot of times that quarter end, it's too late, as far as just the meeting. So I know it's busy and everything happens, but I think that's the general consensus, is really just being in the know and trying to help really where they can help at home to help the teacher in school and become that team versus, and some parents may not want to, and, but that should be an option for parents to be fully involved and up to date. So, hey, they're struggling in this section, and they could possibly help at home. I had a question for you. I mean, as far as the CSE, the Committee on Special Ed, if you're not aware, the CSE chair, what's their role and expectations like within this whole breakdown that you gave?
So quite a few things actually. Their job is to so they chair the meeting, right? And the meetings are generally regarded as a process to gain consensus. So as I explained, you're going to go through the process of analyzing the child's present levels of performance, their management needs, their current, the goals, the accommodations, modifications, all of those things. During that time, a good CSE chair is listening, and they're looking to create a consensus around the table. Sometimes that doesn't come to pass. Now it should be based on data. It should be based on information that is, here's your child's progress, here's your child's data. It is an individualized plan. When those things don't happen and there appears to be a disagreement, that chair then has the responsibility of, creating that suggestion based on what they are hearing, right? So the majority feel as though it's this way, and as the chair, they have that final, so to speak, decision making. It's incumbent upon the chair to make that decision, and to inform the parent of their rights, because there are rights if you disagree with a CSE meeting's outcome. So as far as that goes, then it's their responsibility, like it says in that document. They have to inform, transportation. They have to put in information about the extended school year program. So they're really collecting a lot of information, and they're helping to create the IEP. That is the role of the CSE chair. Some other portions of the IEP responsibility, or the creation of the IEP, were done by the CSE chair in their role as psychologists in the past. So in some cases, they were interpreting, testing, evaluation data. They were explaining what that means to parents. They were doing like those kinds of things in their role as psychologists. Maybe they were even reviewing counseling goals. So the chair's responsibilities are different than the psychologist's responsibilities. And in some cases where they are one and the same, you may see them wearing different hats than when it's just the chair.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a very involved process. I would still recommend, just my recommendation, that we need to better understand what the frustrations and issues are with the parents. A lot of them aren't on this board meeting. A lot of them weren't aware that we were going to discuss this. I would like to have a survey to parents as far as what we can improve and, what's working, what's not type of thing within the special education process. I think it's confusing for a lot of parents. They don't really know what their rights are. I know we're very good at explaining those, but I'm just saying, once they're in the program, a lot of times a lot gets lost on that. So that would be my recommendation, is to send a survey out to parents, just to really kind of get the, what their frustrations are and where we can improve the process. I do think just overall, and you've mentioned it before, and you're going to have training on it, but just the overall communication, not only with parents to teachers, but teachers to administration. I think a lot gets lost just in that alone. But again, I think it's best to kind of get the general consensus of the public and the parents, and see where we can, better the program.
Yeah, I just think it needs to be a team effort. It's a triangle. It's not just all on administration or all on teachers. It's on the parents who advocate for their child, the child as they get old enough, advocating for themselves. And the goal is to become least restrictive and not have them more reliable. So I got to tell you, as a district, I'd like to know the numbers. I don't know why this presentation came out tonight. I don't know where it came from, if it was scheduled or whatever, but I'd like to see the numbers for a district our size and what the state percentage is of classified students and how many kids we have classified in our district. And also the number of 504 meetings. We go above and beyond for 504s. And having a meeting every year is a lot of work. It's a lot of work on your office. If that's not mandated, and I know more of the, when a student is classified and has an IEP, it's more legally binding and stuff. I mean, we're doing a lot of extra work with the annual 504s. I don't know if we should look at that too. And is that really, can we keep up that pace? So Caroline, you don't have to give it to me tonight, but do you know the number of students that we have classified as a district, as a percentage, and what the state percentage is?
I don't have the percentage of what the state percentage is, but I can get back to you. We have 133 students district-wide that receive some kind of service from special education, whether it's related service or an academic program.
Out of how many students enrolled?
836,
Okay.
I think.
So yeah, I mean,
We've had a few in and out in the last couple of weeks, but that's an approximate.
yeah, just to get an idea, thank you. And like I said, this is a good presentation. I mean, I think we should do this. This is part of every year. We're going to do this at the end of every year. It's a good thing. And I agree with Chris. It's just the more knowledge we can have for each other, and the more we have a lot of technology and making available meetings. And I think if anything, COVID taught us we shouldn't just go away from accessing parents at work with Zoom or wherever we can get meetings on. It's very important to have those meetings, have that communication, but I just want to say, I have my own child, and I think we go above and beyond with 504s and special ed services. So I want to applaud everyone. I don't, my communication to me as a parent, always not as a board member, has been outstanding from all the schools I've been in. So I just want to applaud the process and look at the numbers and see how many more kids that we really do help, and leading the way with getting Orton Gillingham and having this multisensory literacy initiatives for our students to benefit from. A lot of schools don't do what we're doing, and people move to Millbrook because of the special education services. So, we can.
Yeah, and Paul, I'm not saying any of that. I think the teachers.
Yeah, but I don't want it to come across like that.
No. I think the teachers are phenomenal. I really do. I mean, I have had personal experience with it for, since my child was in kindergarten. So, the teachers have been phenomenal. It's more of just the process throughout the grades, the communication throughout the grades, and just being more uniform with communication, I think would really excel the program and the students alike. So that's just one simple point.
I got you. I agree. No, I hear you on that one. And that's I guess the hardest challenge is that communication piece but with everything that we have in technology, we should be able to make that work. I would hope, really. Everybody only has one child, when we're working and we're in a district, we're servicing hundreds of them, but to every parent, their one kid is what matters, and their one kid's needs. And that's the way that, we have to look at it. You're right, Chris, about that.
Yeah, and that's totally, it's totally true. But it's not only incumbent upon the parent to make those connections. So I do welcome feedback. I'm not perfect, but I certainly do understand that we can always improve. But without the feedback, it sounds like there might be conversations that are happening like on the outside that aren't necessarily reaching my office. I'm not sure if they're being discussed with case managers or teachers, or, on the occasion, the counselors or building administration. But, I've had a couple of parents who have reached out to me recently. And I think we've been able to come to some good terms. And I also welcome additional feedback. I mean, it's how we're going to learn and grow. And I want the best product to be out there for our students in Millbrook. It's what they deserve. So any feedback is welcomed, and, change takes time. But as you can see, we are working on some positive changes. Not that there was anything wrong before, but we can always strengthen the services that we provide.
And I personally think there's just a lot of, sorry, John. Go ahead, John.
I'm trying. I just want to echo some of what Chris said. I took some words out of my mouth, which is a good thing. But I'd sort of like to see some more aid for new people in the program, that because to understand their roles, their rights, I mean, you want a parent knowledgeable plugged into this because, you know, the child is with the home, is at home quite a bit with the family. So it's good to have a parent really kind of up on this, up as quickly as possible on this for those that want to engage. I mean, some folks go out and get advocates, you know, because it's just a little too confusing or maybe just too much time. But we just need to be able to point people to where to find that information. And I'm not saying we should be duplicating or doing it all over ourselves, but maybe point people to some references so it's easy for them to connect. I know I kind of went through that when I went through it. And that was some of my feelings that just you're kind of lost. You kind of sit there at the CSE meeting and it's like you don't know what exactly your role is and what to say, and maybe I should have been better at that to begin with. But
Yeah.
I would just like to see some improvement there to get people up to speed as soon as possible. The professionals are going to do a good job, I'm sure, looking out, but we need the parents plugged in.
So
Yeah.
if you can, Caroline, if you can take that, I mean, we're not going to solve it here.
Yeah.
If you can take that and think through, you know, I don't know if it like roles and responsibilities, if it gets more confusing as your child gets older, or if it's more confusing when they're young, but maybe it's a matter of gathering, hey, what, you know, your child just finished, I don't know, 4th grade. How did it go? And they're a special ed student. How did it go? What could we have done better? Maybe it's a matter of just collecting these pieces little by little and trying to, because it just seems to me, again, outside looking in, that there's so much interaction and interconnection between teachers and staff and administrators and parents that, like, even a slight breakdown in communications, you know, an email that gets missed, and I don't know how any of this like how the communications go, but if we can, you know, and it should be an ongoing, and I think that was part of the thought of hearing about it tonight, to start thinking, okay, so what's new next year? What are you going to try to make this better, more efficient, more, you know, more interconnected?
Yeah, and one of my thoughts is, which is something that we need to get back to, is having more of like the parent university style, you know, evening sessions where we can provide some of that support for parents, that they can just feel more informed in the process, because I feel like that would be a valuable step in the right direction. And again, you know, being able to collect some of that feedback may give us the specific information as to what types of information they're feeling they could benefit from. So we can certainly work towards something like that for sure. I'm not opposed to it, and I welcome any additional feedback as well.
Okay. Anything else from anybody? Okay. Why don't we do I had asked, I don't know, a while ago about the truant, you know, we saw those truancy reports and the percentages of kids that weren't going to high school, especially high school, like really shocked me, the numbers. So I'd asked Caroline and Laura to bring, you know, now that we're back full time and now the sports are back full time, how's it going? You know, have we gone from the 25% to 5%? So if we can just take a quick look at that.
I will be speedy. Elliot, do you want to throw that one on the screen? Okay, so this is an update. You'll see that the format, you can go to the next one, Elliot. You'll see that the format is exactly the same. The prior period that we reviewed was September 1st till January 12th. And then I looked in comparison to the numbers from April 5th on for the elementary schools, and then from April 19th on for the, because that's when the secondary schools came back. So these are the percentages of daily attendance, the daily attendance percentages that are calculated. So this is total percentage attendance. So as you can see, in some cases, the percentage may have dipped even a little bit, And I think some of that at the middle school level may have to do with the fact that middle schools are very challenging at time in children's lives. And I think that there were some children who actually benefited from learning from home. There was less of that the social aspects of middle school that can be challenging. However, in the past 2 weeks, we've actually gotten 5 additional students to return to school full time, who previously had a very poor attendance, chronic absenteeism pattern. So we were able to re-engage 5 families and 5 students at the middle school. So again, these are, averages, so to speak. So these numbers may have dipped in some areas, they kind of held in others. But the middle school specifically has re-engaged 5 families. They've been doing home visits. They've been having parent meetings. They've been putting specific counseling and social emotional supports in place to be able to get those students re-engaged in attending school in person.
What about the high school, Caroline? I mean, that dropped as well. And that was one of the ones that I thought we were focused on. Sports was going to bring them back, in person was going to bring them back. And
yeah, so this is actually the daily attendance. This wasn't the issue at the high school. What was happening is that the daily attendance rate, students were logging into one class,
right.
And then they weren't necessarily logging in for the remainder of the day. So they were getting credit towards daily attendance because that was the attendance period that drives
Okay.
the reporting. So actually the high school has held pretty close. It's less than, a percentage point. And actually it's less than a half of percentage. But when we look at the numbers of students who had chronic absenteeism, when you looked at a breakdown of their actual course attendance, we do see a significant improvement at the high school as well.
That one here?
Yeah, it's here. It's coming.
There we go. Okay.
So this is actually students with disabilities. The numbers have changed a little bit because we've had some students classified. We've had some students who have been declassified. We had a couple of students move out of district. So as you can see, chronic absenteeism in the fall compared to current percentages. So it has decreased significantly at the high school for students with disabilities. We've re-engaged 12 of them. 2 of them remain struggling with attendance. And we are working on them specifically. These are our English language learners. And again, this is a comparison. Oh, I apologize. I never changed the column headers here, but I did change the numbers. This is not actually a group that we saw attendance problems in the first place. They have been pretty even throughout, and we've even seen a slight improvement in some places. Next slide. So this is the numbers of chronic absenteeism, and you can see that we've actually had improvements everywhere, but Alden. So I do want to mention that as I looked at the specific list of students at Alden, we had some students who had re-engaged and were attending regularly, but we also had a couple of students that had medical reasons or deaths in the family where they were not in attendance for periods of time. And the rate of chronic absenteeism being 10% of or more of the enrolled school days between this time. Some of those students had COVID, they had COVID symptoms and had to stay out of school. So there might be all different reasons why these students at Alden. So the number is a little bit inflated because of that. We had multiple students who had medical reasons for being out. At the high school, we've seen a significant drop actually. So while we still have 16 students who need a lot more encouragement and we are working with the families, we have had a significant drop and a significant number of students who have re-engaged since students have been back in school.
Yeah.
And then this is just a breakdown. This is repetitive information, but a breakdown by grade. One of the things, if you want to just go forward, grade 2. If you look at grade 2, they have been very consistent. Grade 3 as well. Their students are attending school, so that's pretty awesome. We've seen some fluctuations throughout in terms of enrollment numbers. And then if you go forward, Elliot, you'll see that these numbers chronically absent fall to current. We're seeing an improvement pretty much across all grade levels.
Okay.
And this is the high school. The most significant grade was that 10th grade year. They had 15 students who were chronically absent. We have that down to about 5.
So, I mean, we're okay with basically where we are now. I mean, not okay with it, but it's within a normal, like, you know, if before COVID, would would these numbers have been comparable?
Pretty close to it, and we still have about 85% of our students who are chronically absent are students who are attending remotely. So
Okay.
I know that the principals have been working hard to encourage students to come back because that's where we can provide them the most support. But you know, not all families feel comfortable with that right now. So we're doing the best we can to support them where they are.
Okay. Any questions for Caroline? All right. So we did the questions from the public. Let's move down to the committee reports. First one's facilities. Do we have anything, Claudia? Or Jen? Or Chris?
No, Brian, sorry. Brian, you took notes last time. Mine are in the car. I don't have them in front of me from our last meeting. Sorry.
Sure, no problem. And Perry, I think we might have skipped over financials.
Oh, shoot. Actually, we skipped over 2 things. There was I actually skipped over the whole financials and accepting scholarship. Now, before again, my apologies, bouncing around. Laura, wasn't there something to do with Wi-Fi for the high school?
Yes, thank you for that. Elliot, do you want to speak to that regarding live streaming and graduation possible opportunity?
Sure, I love speaking about opportunities. Thanks. I'll talk quickly. I know everybody's time is a little short tonight. So just, you know, in the spirit of giving the board as plenty of heads up as possible whenever the opportunities for little projects come up. One of the things that we've been looking into probably since January or February is just the opportunity to expand our learning environment outdoors. The most logical place to do that to start is up at our athletic field by piggybacking off of the fiber connection at the field house in the grandstand bleacher area. So we've been working for months on feasibility studies and working with our vendor partners to figure out if it's possible and how it's possible. We just in the last week or so received quotations for augmenting the fiber service at the field house. The number is about $16,000, almost $17,000, and there's an additional cost that we're going to have for keeping the equipment temperature controlled. So we're estimating this project to be roughly, you know, $20,000 to $22,000. We're still working on that last piece of it, but we wanted to share it with the board because it's something that we definitely want to do in the future. But there may be an opportunity to accelerate the project and have the opportunity to stream graduation on the backbone of the district's network rather than trying to use hotspots and cobble it together as we've done with our sports over the last few months. This
excuse me, Elliot. So other than you know, like graduation and stuff, what have we gone through a list of, you know, where this would really provide us an advantage for education?
Certainly. I mean, one of the things that came out of the COVID planning was like, should this, you know, perpetuate or happen again, you know, we have a lot more flexibility outside of the buildings than inside in terms of gathering. So there's the opportunity to create an outdoor learning space. I mean, this can be, we can turn our bleachers into basically an outdoor classroom that we can use anytime the weather permits, which would, you know, we have a lot of interest there just to get outside of the 4 walls and really, you know, enjoy being outside. It also allows us to live stream all of our athletics and extracurricular programming that would happen up on the field, including, but certainly not limited to graduation. And the goal would be, you know, this is the kind of project that we can scale. So, you know, if you come around campus, you know, even this time of year, we've got teachers that love to bring kids outside and bring their books outside and learn. Well, in the last 18 months, we've gone fully one-to-one, which means that those books are being sometimes, if not completely supplanted by Chromebooks or digital devices. which really hamstrings the teacher's ability to go outside for learning opportunities when they're tied to the network that only exists inside the four walls of the building. So like I said, it's an opportunity to create that outdoor learning space. It's also an opportunity for us to continue to stream our athletics and extracurriculars, which if you look at our numbers, we have some of our, basketball games and soccer games have over 500 views on YouTube. I mean, there's a lot of interest in streaming, and much like the board meetings right now. I mean, once we give something to the community, it's a tough ask to take it back. And I don't think any of us are really interested in pulling back those things that we've given to our community in terms of digital connections with the district. But I would like to, explore this option. Like I said, it's something that we plan to do in the future as soon as next year. But if the board would support it, Mr. Freed would work with us to move around some money. That would result in a budget transfer that would come to the board. And the last thing we wanted to do is throw a budget transfer at the board without having a conversation about the rationale as to why we would be asking for that money to move at this time.
So I got two questions. One is probably the most important. Will the Wi-Fi be in the gazebo?
That is part of the plan, actually. We're going to saturate the grandstand with the intent to reach to the gazebo. Yeah, I mean, it's you laugh, but that's certainly part of the deal. We want to be able to provide access where people are sheltered.
So seriously, the real question is, we need to see that it's going to become an integral part of the academics, right? It can't just be sort of a science project. And if the teacher wants to have a class outside one day, that's cool. But maybe next year they don't do it at all because it was too much trouble. It needs to be. There needs to be a real, and again, my opinion, needs to be a real tied academics on, and that can include sports, that can include some of the club stuff, that even the drone stuff. But as part of that presentation, I would want to see details on how this thing is going to sort of be worth the money. I don't know about the rest of the board.
Would you be confined to, you mentioned the bleachers. I mean, what about the actual field? Would you be confined to that area just around the bleachers, or would you be able to have classes on the football field?
I don't know that we actually want to have classes on the turf field, only to preserve the condition of the field. Depending on the footwear, there's footwear requirements. There's, you can't.
Okay. Well, I mean, even there's a field on the other side. There's the track area. I get what you're saying. I'm just saying, what's the circumference of the area that you're talking for $20,000?
Well, so it's a scalable project, right? So what we have to do is really put the work in to convert the head end of the fiber connection in the press box to have a switch that can receive multiple input devices like our Wi-Fi access points. Once we have that in place, we can piggyback off of that and expand that area outwards. This is also something that we can add to building adjacent locations as well. So we can bring this to Elm, we can bring this to Alden with a similar configuration. This would just be probably the most cost-intensive location, only because of the distance away from the building and the hardware required to do it. But yes, it is scalable. These Wi-Fi devices can have radio antenna contact from unit to unit, which allows us to expand out from a center point.
So, I mean, one of the things, even going back, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years, Elm was looking for a way to do video announcements instead of just having the kids do the audio announcements. And we had talked about, the kids going out and basically doing a live video of, hey, it must be spring, look at the buds coming, that's what I mean. If we can tie this into academics that are going to, have an ongoing purpose, that I think that's got to be critical to us making that decision. I mean, I think it sounds like a good idea, but again, best laid plans of mice and men.
Yeah, I do really echo what Elliot is saying. I think there would be a number of teachers who would absolutely love to use quote unquote like an outdoor classroom kind of thing, where they could take their classes up there, have that Wi-Fi, be able to, like you said, work through some science experiments. I have observed classes doing science experiments in forensics, you know, that they've actually left chicken out and gone back to measure like the decompensation. Kind of gross, I know. But then doing labs like that, being able to go out and sort of break down the walls of the classroom. I also think just in general, as we look to promote technology skills in the district, I'm thinking of like, you know, a radio club that was I had in my previous district, where students who may be into that kind of thing could provide like the music for athletic competitions, et cetera. It just gives us a lot of different opportunities. And I feel like it's almost one of those things where if we build it, they will come. There would be proposals left and right to use it.
So why don't you bring it to the technology committee? Because I don't, and I don't think I missed any, but I don't remember the discussion of outdoor access, you know, Wi-Fi access coming up. Maybe you should bring this to the technology committee, Elliot, and say, look, you know, we're thinking about doing this, but, you know, let's throw some ideas out here about how you would use it, how you would, you know, use it to advance academics in Millbrook.
Certainly. I mean, and to be honest, Barry, the reason why we're bringing it up now is because it took this long to even know if it was remotely possible.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why we wanted, the last thing I wanted to do was go into public session and say, hey, we could do Wi-Fi outside, and then come back 2 weeks later and go, sorry, no, we can't. It's not really a thing. You know, so we did wait until we knew for sure, but that's a great idea. We'll bring it in. The only reason I really asked Laura if we could discuss it today, and I certainly don't want to put pressure on the board, but there is a lead time issue if we want to capture this project in time for graduation. You know, we'll do our best without it, but in order to stream graduation this June with the attendance restrictions in place, we'd need to move on this sooner than later. So
how much of the equipment that you're talking about? I mean, there's a, you know, an access piece, fee, whatever. But how much of the equipment, let's say, you know, we said go forward with it for, you know, so that we can get graduation, you know, do graduation with this. How much of the equipment, if for some reason it turned out that was basically the only idea that we came up with for using this technology, is the equipment reusable in other places?
Yeah, so what we would basically, we have no usable internet access at the field house, right? So if you go up there with a laptop, there's nowhere to plug it in, there's nothing to jump off. The lion's share of the cost in this project is to provide a network switch at the field house and 2 wireless access points that are exterior models of, or exterior versions of our internal units. So in short, those could be relocated to the middle school, to Alden. If, you know, Tom Lipka says, we can use them down here if nobody's using them up at the field, I can take them off the wall and bring them down. And we would still have the switch up there that can be used for any future network needs up in that area.
Elliot, this would be a closed network, right? It's not open like for taxpayers when they're walking on the track or anything else. I'm just
curious. Thank you so much for bringing that up. So this is very much a Millbrook internal network. We would be bringing our inside network outside for our staff and our students. So we don't what we don't want to do, and what I was totally afraid of, is 25 parents trying to Facebook live stream their kid's soccer game, right? Because that would totally jam it. So we very intentionally planned this to be something that only our devices and our equipment would work on.
Okay. So give us the price again. It's for hardware, and then
I would say the budget number I would be comfortable sharing with is about $23,000, and that's right now. We have quotations for just under $17,000 in network labor and material. And again, we have to work on a cooling solution, which is either going to be a self-contained cooled box, basically a mini fridge for network equipment, if I could be very, very basic in the language, or weighing that against the cost of really providing climate control for the entirety of the press box. And those numbers are not too far off from each other. So that's why we're looking at it both ways. And Michael Goose is helping us out with that. We're just not in the place where we have a number yet.
Yeah, but you're talking about leaving this thing on all the time, right? So unlike the press box, you can't when the game's over, you can't turn the heat or turn the air conditioning off. You'd have to leave it on
We would leave,
continuously.
right, but only for those months where we provide cooling. And again, I would look to do
Right.
a high temp thermostatic control where, you know, we don't have to keep it at 72. We could keep it at 85. We just want to keep our network equipment under 90 degrees.
Okay. All right. What are your thoughts, Board of Ed?
Elliot, when did you start planning for this, look at it?
We started just looking into the feasibility back, I want to say January, early February. It took us a few months to really get to a place where we had to have site visits with the engineers to come and check the fiber, check the connections, and see if we could piggyback. Remember, this is, and again, I don't know if I clarified this, but we're piggybacking off of fiber connections that were installed as part of the last iteration of our video management system project. So, you know, thankfully, whoever designed that project gave us more fiber connectivity and more bandwidth than we needed for the 2 PTZ cameras up at the field. We would be piggybacking off of that infrastructure, which is a huge cost savings. One of the things that would have killed this project is if that fiber wasn't viable, we would have had to run a new home run of fiber back to the high school, and that just we knew that was going to be a cost prohibitive.
So when did you find it was viable to?
I can look for it was within the last week and a half, I want to say.
Okay. And, you know, I just wish again, instead of being forced, well, I don't know if forced is the right word, but surprised with this, it would have been nice if we would have known you were looking at this back in January. You know, this is another, guess what, we can do this, but we got to do it tonight type of thing. I'm not blaming you for it. It's an administrative faux pas, not coming from you. So that's my only concern. I know it's not a lot of money, but it's still taxpayer money.
I appreciate that. And again, the only thing I would say is that, at least on my part, we were trying to balance not getting people super excited about something that we may not have been able to do until we knew we could. And that, again, that may not play into the timeline. Certainly, I don't want to feel like anybody's put against the wall.
All right, thank you.
I would agree.
think.
I would just say, I would agree. We should go forward in a measured, disciplined way at this, not a rush way. So I'm sorry that maybe one event may miss something, but yeah, we need to do it the right way.
Understood. And like I said, we had every
That's fine.
We had planned for it in next year's budget. It was just there was an opportunity to discuss maybe.
I appreciate your diligence there, but it just, I don't think it's working out time wise. Not for this year.
So how do we last year's graduation, well, that was in the parking lot really. So how do we, if we don't do this, there's no streaming of graduation?
Well, if we don't do this, we're going to be, the only alternative we would have is to use our hotspots that we have on hand for, you know, remote access to internet for families that may not have, or staff members that may not have. We do have those devices in our possession. They're paid for through the end of June. You know, we can use that. It doesn't have the bandwidth capacity that a hard, you know, a fiber connection would to our network. So, you know, I can't speak to what the quality of the stream is going to be, but we'll do our best. We also have contingency plans in place where we would look to record the graduation and then upload it in better quality should the stream not work.
You know, last year the graduation was amazing. The only thing that like threw you know, a cold water on the thing was the fact that the live streaming didn't work. And I'd hate to go, you know, a whole year and then we end up where, yeah, we're live streaming it, but every 2 frames it's freezing. But
I'd be lying if I said this wasn't part of the reason I asked today for this conversation.
No, I mean,
if I can add something just from a funding standpoint, just sharing that. So it would be Elliot's intention. We would be purchasing this through BOCES. So we would be fully expecting to get our aid ratio. The other thing is Elliot did budget for this for next year. So really, we're talking about doing this 2 months earlier. And of course, a different budget, but this was indeed part of his budget for next year. And accelerating it has the effect of doing a couple of different things. Number one, he would have the opportunity to buy more devices to be able to help with being able to get the number of devices up to where it needs to be. But again, it kind of fortifies our graduation solution. And because of where we're going with streaming athletics as well, it was already part of his infrastructure plan. So really we'd be talking about doing it in June instead of doing it in July or August. So it's only a duration of a month or two. The difference.
I mean, the problem is we keep going round and round with this, where, you know, we say, look, as soon as you're thinking about this stuff, bring it to us. And, you know, give us an idea, even if it's a rough order, you know, a ROM of the cost of the thing, just give it to it. And then, you know, that way we're not sitting here, look, we got to do this week, or we can't get the stuff on order. And at some point we just have to say, look, you missed it. I don't know. I'll put it out to the board to a straw poll.
Perry, can I just say for a second
me.
too? I mentioned this beforehand, and everybody like shot it down. I think we need to explore it. I think there's other options. I'm going to argue about it. There's Local Live, who's willing to come up to Dutchess County. They've done some presentations with BOCES. There's other companies that, you know, we pay $15,000 a year. We're Omni AD, and all of our events are streamed. We have a camera in the auditorium. We got a camera on a football field. And we got a camera in the basketball field. And all through this pandemic, not one parent missed a game. And nothing was interrupted. It's scheduled. You get a schedule every day of all your sporting events. You can have your concerts live stream. $15,000 for the year. So to me,
what are they plugging into though, Paul?
I don't know the technology of it, but I'm just saying to you that the point is that the cameras are set up. They come into your building, they run the wires, they run the cameras, and there might be some more initial expense with that. But I'm just saying, like, I think, you know, when you have an event that all of a sudden is disrupted and you're missing like the whole key part of an event, it's like penny wise and dollar foolish. And I brought it up months ago, and it was all shot down. So I want things explored. I don't want to see one option. I like to see 3 or 4 different options. There's another company that is up in the Rockland County area. It does a lot of the Putnam and Dutchess schools. You know, Local Lives in Westchester, but they do come up to Dutchess. And Elliot, you've spoken to people from Local Lives, and we've not had them in here. And I think it should be a conversation.
Just to clarify, this solution is what we need to is what we would need to do to explore any of those options, regardless of vendor. Without the network connectivity, there's nothing to plug those cameras into.
Well, the court has to come before the horse, but I'm just saying, like, I just don't want to have, like, you know, the sports that we do have or the games that we do have. My point is that if you have a concert, you can put it where you want to put it so everything can be viewed. I mean, even without COVID, parents can be at work watching their kids. If I'm a dad and I'm working late and I got a softball game up on the turf, or we got a football game or whatever, you can watch that game. You can just hit the link. Everybody, I mean, it's just very accessible, and it seems like very easy. I agree with you. I don't know the technology that you and Perry know. I know the user end as an AD and as an administrator and as a parent, that it's nice to get that schedule every day. Oh, I got one kid playing here, one kid playing there. Let me go watch the game at Millbrook, but I can also be in Rockland County on my phone I'm not selling that company. I don't care what it is. I'm just saying there's got to be a venue that works. And I'm working with one every day, and it works.
All right, so Paul, you're a no for now. I mean, for like moving forward. John?
No, not now.
Okay, Howard?
No, another last minute idea.
Claudia?
No, I think you guys should.
Was that a no or that's a yes?
No, that's a yes. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Jen?
Sorry, I'm on mute. I do like the idea of it. It's, I don't like the last minute, like you were saying, but I do think it's a good idea. I don't want to rush into it for graduation. I would vote yes.
You would vote yes?
Yes.
Okay, so 2 yes, 3 no's. Chris?
And knowing it's the foundation that we need, and I trust Elliot's not going to do a rush job, it's a yes.
Okay, so 3 and 3.
Nope.
And
You guys do this crap all the time,
No, no pressure, Perry. No pressure.
Perry's-
No pressure at all.
Perry's a technology guy, so I know where that's going to go, man. Come on, he's
Yeah.
a technology guru.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is a piece that's got to be done either way. And even for the graduation, we can still look at getting one of these other guys to do it. I mean, the problem I have with these other guys is we had another guy at graduation last year, and that's the part that fell apart. So I'll say yes. And so, it's 4-3, move forward, but as soon as you possibly can, come back in here with some, cost comparisons, like, if we just buy the camera and stick it up there, or we have, whatever. All right.
Yeah,
I mean, basically, this has nothing to do with the cameras or anything. It has everything to do with Wi-Fi at the high school. I mean, up at the fields.
Excuse me, Barry, but I think Elliot was saying he doesn't have time for us to be having cost comparisons and waiting for us.
We can still, no. I said yes, so you can move forward on it. And
He's saying secondary, John.
Right, but I still want to see, some cost comparisons at the June 1st meeting.
So if I'm understanding correctly, we'll move forward with the Wi-Fi project piece of it, but we want to share with the board options for how that would grow out, both extracurricular and academically, and we're going to bring it to the technology committee next week for further discussion. Is that about right?
The streaming end of it, Elliot. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, what you're going to
For
use,
sure.
what avenue.
And
For
the
sure,
yes includes climate control of the press box?
Well,
you gotta
climate control of the switches, whether that's the whole box. So like a 2 foot by 2 foot cube to contain the switch costs almost $4,000. So what we're looking at is whether or not we can cool the entirety of the press box for less than $4,000 or pretty close to
Here
it.
we go with energy usage. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why, again, I do
How's
have a
that- how's that
background.
fit?
Again,
How's that fit, Perry?
again, on June 1st, I would like to see, some more breakdown on the details. Because,
What security on this box? We don't, we have cameras up there, we have an alarm system, it's all gonna be monitored?
We have cameras. The box itself, the switch would be in a contained locked box. The press box is kept locked regularly. And yeah, we do have eyes on the network equipment too. I mean, we have eyes on the entirety of the
we
grant.
also need to bolt it down. But, all right.
Thank you.
All right. So now we go backwards a little further, or not a little further. Where the hell did I put my bond? No. Financial wants, Jesus, financial and warrants. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any questions? Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Accept scholarship for Ted Follis Scholarship. Do I have a motion?
So
I'll make
moved.
a-
Excuse me, sorry. Do I have a second?
If Chris
Whoever-
did it, I'll second it.
There you go.
Okay. Oops. Any comments other than thank you so much for the
Thank you.
donation?
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? All right. Board for the subcommittees, facilities committee.
Okay, go Brian, and I'll back you up where I can.
Sounds good. Give me 1 second. And Chris, feel free to chime in too then. So we had a conversation about a bunch of different things in this meeting. The very last one. One was about a senior rock or a bunch of senior rocks. There was a proposal that Mr. Sipe shared with us from the senior class. And there was a thought that they wanted to be able to add a whole bunch of different rocks, well, a whole bunch, 3 more rocks, ultimately over time to be able to have a little bit more representation in that area. Through discussion, we kind of, the facilities committee kind of decided that it was, 1 rock was more appropriate for first an aesthetic standpoint, and also that it's kind of a rite of passage. You had a senior rock up there. It was, you decorate it early in the year, you take a picture of the rock, you have it in the yearbook. So you have a consistent memory that lasts over time. And maybe you could even think about putting a bunch of pictures in the hallway, but the thought to put a bunch of boulders up there, there were some safety concerns also, aesthetics concern, and just the original thought that the thought that the original proposition was to kind of honor the seniors, not all of the classes that come through. So on behalf of the facilities committee, we shared with those requesting that we were going to go ahead and stick with 1 rock, at least for now. We had a conversation about HBO wanting to be able to use our property. They're filming something, a mini series called The White House Plumbers. They want to be able to use our property for 2 purposes. One is just to be able to stage trucks, and this would be done over the summer when we're not in session, because that probably would have been a deal breaker for us. And they also want to be able to use our our gymnasium in order to be able to stage their own catering, and it would take place over 1 day and 1 day only. And it was the prevailing thought of the committee that, based on getting the correct certificates of insurance and making sure that everything was in place the way it needed to be, and that there were no legal concerns, that we may as well go ahead and do that.
There's no weight concerns on the parking lots?
Yeah, we're going to look into all of that before, okay. And you know, I don't know the trucks that they have. I don't know the weights on that, but we'll check that out for sure. All right. We talked about Elm Drive beautification, and that was just kind of our first step in a plan that we're going to put together to get some large scale beautification around the district. And start sprucing this place up and really thinking about it from an aesthetic standpoint. And we already have some things going here at the middle school, so we're excited about that. But we got the flowers from Millbrook Gardens, and Laura shared out already on that collaboration between Mike Sotero's vision and bring it to fruition with the teamwork of our facilities department. So it looks great out there, and excited to expand that and just show the pride that we absolutely already have, but show it in our beauty. I've got a fly in here. So and then we had a discussion around a safety committee discussion that we want to be able to have at our safety team meeting tomorrow. And I just want to share that broadly, and we'll share back the results of that. But we have a couple of good conversations that we need to be able to have at our safety committee meeting tomorrow, and we'll report out more on that. And Chris, Claudia, did I miss anything?
What's happening with the gazebo?
Well, we have not yet heard from the village about, well, actually, so I happened to see the architect, the surveyor in the village, and that was work that actually was supposed to happen today. So I don't have the results of the survey yet to see exactly how much of the gazebo the district owns and how much of the gazebo the village owns, but we'll find out more about that, and we'll need to look into that a little bit more deeply. May require an executive session discussion about that. However, we do have a quote that says that it would be about $7,800 to demolish the gazebo, if that was the direction that that we, and I say we, the village and the school district, ended up deciding on. But there was still commitment on the part of the village to do some version of a survey to see exactly how important that gazebo is to the community.
So who owns that? Is that Tim?
Who owns what?
Getting the survey done with the folks from the village?
Well, so Tim was making the arrangements, and he did. We are contracting through Brian Houston. I saw Brian earlier, late last week, and he was getting to it this week. And I believe he was on site today. And the cost of that survey will be borne it'll be split by the district and the village equally. And that's kind
How
of
much?
where we
Do we
are.
have any idea how much that survey is?
I don't, and I don't want to hazard a guess. We've used them in the past for capital projects. So,
But have they basically asked the village, the residents of the village, if they care? I mean, if the village residents don't really care if it's there, and I don't know whether this is true or not, but if they don't care if it's there or not, then, why waste a bunch of money with surveyors? And let's just, I mean, because if they wanted a gazebo, instead of moving that one, they could build another one probably at a tenth the cost of moving it.
So the conversation that we attended, that we had, and that was Chris, Claudia, Laura, myself, and Tim Colopy, Mayor Colopy was there, and Mike Herzog was there. And I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. And really, we all agreed that the first step was indeed finding out with the survey who owns what, just to be able to understand basically responsibilities and who has standing and what, and because
Okay.
So that will help for sure.
All right.
Ryan, did you want to mention anything about the AT&T thing?
Sure.
I don't know if there's much to mention. I just figured I'd mention it.
Yeah. So AT&T wants to be in a position to, and thanks for that reminder, Chris. I didn't have that on my radar. No pun intended. AT&T wants to be in a position to add devices to our tower. So if we choose not to, they may choose to take the tower down and just be done with it. And otherwise, I'm also in the middle of negotiating with them a new price on the tower. Many years ago, and geez, we've had 7 amendments to that land lease. But many years ago, my predecessor and a previous superintendent entered into an agreement with AT&T to build it and to be able to bring in a revenue. Right now, the revenue is approximately $35,000 that we get on an annual basis from AT&T. And I'm in the process of renegotiating that contract with the thought that we might consider allowing them to add the additional equipment on the tower. So one of the questions came up, well, what about the safety for our community? Is there anything that we need to be concerned about from a 5G standpoint? What does the research say? So that's all stuff that we're currently looking into. But if AT&T had their way, they would be adding a bunch of equipment on and securing it with some guide wires behind the garage. So nothing too intrusive, nothing that Mike Ragusa thought was going to be an issue from a facility standpoint, but they would want to install a couple of concrete pads and secure the pole with some wires. So nothing crazy.
Brian, but hold on, Brian, we need to also, you were going to look into getting a mock-up of what it's going to look like, because they want to put in the, I don't know, the poles, the ballards, to prevent anybody from hitting the wires. So aesthetically, that could look horrendous. You know, these long wires coming down, and then they want to put 25 feet of the ballards so they don't, so the trucks back there don't hit the wires and pull down the pole. They want to do it in 2 different spots. So that's something that you were going to ask them to give you a mock-up of what it's going to look like, so we can see visually whether we want to do that or not.
Yeah, and that actually was our request for the bollards, to make sure that it was safe back there. So, but yeah, yep, that mock-up still needs to be delivered.
I would think you got to deal with secret too. Review of that. No.
Yeah.
Since
Well, and
the site's expanding. The site's expanding, so.
And the folks, especially in the condos, you know, before we go letting them move forward with this, we need to make sure that you know, we're not going to have protesters down there.
Yep, so we'll find out about the safety. Our understanding is it's not going to change how the pole looks that much. And the pole is already there, but the wires would certainly be a new addition.
Yeah, my concern, Brian, is if they're adding 3 guide wires, they're adding a lot of weight to that pole.
Yeah.
So it's really, what kind of size are they adding to that pole? Because, you know, it's one of those poles where you don't even really notice it's there unless you look for it, but once you see it, you know it's there. So if it's, you know, twice the size of what it is now, you know, that really could be an eyesore.
You can't unsee it. You can't unsee it now, Chris. You look up there every day.
Right. Exactly. And plus the safety is a big thing, even if it's not 5G. I mean, if it's, you know, much more powerful, you know, cell tower, you know, who's to say, you know, what the harmful effects is.
I was here for that original vote. And by the way, the plans were to take up the hill. We actually trenched some electrical stuff up the hill to where the permanent location was supposed to be. So, but that kind of got nuked along the way. Anyway, long story.
Yeah, and in fact, they have no desire to move it. They're fine with that location now. So what was a temporary thing has become a permanent.
Yeah, it was called the Cow. I don't know what. It's
That's
still
exactly what it was. It was on wheel. It was on. Yeah, they called it a
something on wheels.
Something on wheels. Yeah.
So back in those days, was that what, half G? Was that what that was, John?
What?
All right. Anything else for facilities?
It was smoke signals back then, Perry.
Yeah. I keep thinking of the Andy Griffith show where you wind it up and yell at the operator. Anything else for facilities?
No.
Board goals? Anything, have you guys, I don't think you've met again, have you?
No, Paul, are you jumping in for that, or?
We did meet, and we just didn't continue with the goals. We just went over the updated superintendent evaluation. So we picked the ones that we wanted to stay as inclusive, and that was it. The committee's not meeting, hasn't met.
Okay. Board Food Service Committee.
Okay, I canceled the meeting for earlier today. And Brian, were you prepared with Holly to discuss the long-term increases for employees?
Sure. So let me, and if we get into specifics, we can talk about that in executive session as well. But let me give you a broad overview. I'm happy to do that of what the facilities committee, the food service committee had discussed. So just in terms of background, where we've been, so at a previous board meeting and at a presentation from Holly, it was brought up that there are some morale issues that we should be considering, and we have some things that we need to think about in terms of the fact that because of the fact that minimum wage was raised from $11.10 to $11.80 to $12.50, all in 2 years. We now have some issues that we have some long-standing cafeteria workers who are making the same amount of money as anybody who's first coming in, and they have a skill set and a dedication and a loyalty. And the board expressed some desire that we consider honoring that service. So that was remanded back by the board to the Food Services Committee. Food Services Committee had some discussion around some paradigm to be able to responsibly reward that service, where it wasn't something that was going to be too overly dramatic so as to cause the interfund transfer to the cafeteria fund to be increased entirely too much, but we did want to be able to think about honoring that service on the part of our longer standing employees. So there was a consideration on the part of the Food Services Committee to think about this in terms of, well, how do we do that? And maybe it should be that there's a consideration of up to $0.10 an hour, an additional wage per year of service. And that felt very reasonable to all members of the Food Service Committee at the time. And we talked about that so we have, and again, I don't want to get too much in depth here, but just conceptually, let me share, we felt like it was honoring. If we thought about that, the total cost to the whole department would be $1,500, between $1,500 and $1,600. And what that would do and what we wanted the board's consideration about, we wanted to share with you and hear your thoughts. So if we did that, that would range from having an hourly increase of anywhere from $0.10 to 57 cents. And that
So
in the aggregate came out to about $1,500.
why don't we do this then? I mean, as long as the board members that are on this committee are, behind this, why don't we table it for now? Have you come in to maybe next meeting's executive session with, here's each of the people in food services. This is what they are. This is what we're proposing they go to. And then we can also I would assume we need a motion to do that so we can get the proper motion worded. Is that, John and Howard, does that make sense to you guys?
Makes sense to me. John, what about you?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, all right, so why don't we do that? And we'll do it at the June 1st meeting. I think there's,
Can we
right?
see are we able to see what each of the workers are making? Can we get an example
Well,
of
that's
that
what I
what
just
we-
said. That's what
Okay.
I said is they'll come in with each member of this, staff. Here's what they're making. This is what we're proposing, and then a summary that says this is the overall impact of the budget.
I'll be happy to have that prepared for the first June meeting and executive session.
Are we able to see what comparable districts are paying? Is that possible? Just for stuff in the area, like what other schools are paying or other jobs in the area that are doing some similar work?
I'm happy to get food service rates from other districts for sure.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
All right. Anything else from food services?
Are we able to like seeing what comparable districts are paying? Is that possible? You know, like just for like stuff in the area, like what
I think that's Cheryl's feed.
Yeah, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cheryl's and I have nothing further. So we want to
Okay.
segue to Cheryl.
Yeah, why don't we take a quick break here and have Cheryl give us the results of the election. You muted, Cheryl?
I have nothing further. So segue to Cheryl.
Yeah, why don't we take a why is that echoing like that?
She's just got to mute our feed. No, not you, Cheryl. She's got to mute our feed.
Oh, it's you guys who are doing it. Okay. I didn't know what was happening. Okay, so the budget passed. It's 233 yeses, 57 no.
Yeah, why don't we take a why is that echoing?
Cheryl, you got to mute your YouTube. You have a YouTube feed running simultaneously. That's the delay that they're hearing.
you muted yourself again, Cheryl.
You can all be quiet for 30 seconds so there's no delay. Bro.
Might have a tab open from before when we were trying to get online.
You're muted, Cheryl.
Okay. So the budget passed, 233 votes for yes, 57 no. For the board member elections, David Labarnway, 209 votes. Chris LaBelle was a write-in of 101 votes. So we have 2 members. And that was our vote.
What
We
about
had a total of 293 voters.
what about the other
Raising the cap.
the extent
Oh, I'm sorry. For Proposition 2 was a vote for yes, 223 votes and 62 no. So you did well.
well, thank you very much, Millbrook.
Yeah.
Hopefully we will prove worthy of it again. All right, excellent. Thank you, Cheryl.
You're welcome.
Thanks to all the folks that worked the election too.
Yep. Thank you to everyone who was here working this vote. They really did an awesome job. So thank you. Have a good night, guys.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Are you
Thank
not staying with
everyone
us, Cheryl?
No, I'm going to pack up.
I don't understand
It's
this.
gonna be a late
Thank you,
one.
Cheryl.
Suddenly they're slacking. All right, very good. Let's go back to the committee reports. Board Policy Committee, John, any updates? I assume-
No, we're still waiting for NISBA. I think I'm going to have to shake the
Don't
tree.
let me leave the meeting.
Okay. District Data Committee, has that met?
We're working on a date for next week, actually.
Okay. Leadership Team, Paul? Have they met? Paul? You
No,
there?
no, have not met.
Okay. Safety Committee,
I think Brian hit on it. Tomorrow's a meeting.
tomorrow, yeah.
Yep, and give an update.
All right, District Technology Committee meets next week. And I would like to see more discussion Hey,
We got you.
you're muted, Cheryl.
I guess
How'd you do?
I guess I'm staying.
Yeah, see, that's what happens when you try to run away on it.
Oh, okay.
All right,
You
let's
can move the hosting rights to me if you want to, if you need to
Yeah,
go.
I will.
and that YouTube thing is up and running still?
It says live on YouTube.
YouTube
Alright.
stream is running.
All right, so wellness committee, we talked about monthly reports. Dutchess County School Board, we met not last Thursday, Thursday before. Really spent most of the time going through the really in-depth version of the child protection stuff. Just, it was a brutal evening. Between making you angry and making you just upset, it's unbelievable. But I do encourage us to take advantage of Rick and get that into get it as many places as we can, and it's open to private. They'll do it for clubs, they'll do it for whatever. Enrollment report is there for your entertainment. Anybody have any questions on it? Facilities report from April. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at it. I don't think this one doesn't cover the disaster last week. So I think, maybe it's best to wait till next week or next month to talk about some of this stuff. Does anybody have any questions on the facilities report? All right, the MEF report, Chris, you got anything?
Laura covered it before, but Taste to Go is set for June 5th. For tickets, just go to their Facebook page and you can hit tickets available and you fill out a Google Doc. You can scan the barcode and you buy tickets, and it's that simple. You just pick a time of when you want to pick it up and enjoy. But like Laura said, all the proceeds, go back to the school district for grants and different programs. So it's a great cause, and hopefully everyone will join in. That's about it.
Very good. Thanks, Chris. PTO, Jen?
Nothing right now.
Okay. Superintendent's mileage, always the thriller. Suspension incident report. Anyone have any comments or questions about that? All right. Future agenda items. We'll actually, what happened here? We'll actually ask to have a couple of those things brought back into the June 1st meeting that we talked about earlier, but want to have an in-depth discussion about this internship program. It's been, at first it was great, and then it sort of fell apart, and I don't know where it is now, but if we're going to have it, we need to make sure that it's excellent, but those are the things that we have on the agenda, not to mention, some of our later this month, we've got some special meetings to talk about superintendent evaluation and those things. There's no discussion, no expectations required. So do we have a motion to go back to executive session?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Yeah, we've got a number of these employee things that need to be taken care of, including the one that we moved off of the consent agenda. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? All right, send us away.
Who's going with you, Perry?
Oh, hang on a minute. I guess it's, let's see. We should probably do, trying to think who goes first. Well, we definitely need Laura. Yeah, I guess we can start with Laura and Caroline. We can take care of, excuse me. Actually, Laura, Caroline, and Brian, I think, would be fine.
All right, your rooms are posted.
Am I breakout room 2?
Yep, the exec session is in breakout too. So
Thank you.
Paul, John, Perry, you should, if you hit the breakout room button, you should see an invite to room 2.
I don't see it. I see the meeting. I don't see
You got to click on join breakout room at the bottom.
Yeah, I don't see that.
I don't have that.
Hang on, let me see if I can force you in.
I know we got a separate email from Laura for executive session.
No, we should be
Yeah.
able to.
She sent links out.
Well, it's only me, John, Paul, and
I got it.
that are. Let's just over here, some other place. Huh.
The last man standing, Perry.
Well, I guess I should just go home or go to bed. Yeah, I'm not seeing it, Elliot.
Let me see if I can send you. If not, I'm going to move you to room 1 and then I'm gonna move you back to, no, hold on, I'm gonna move you back to room 2. There you go. You got it? Hi, Beth. I'm gonna send you in a sec. You should have a pop-up invitation to room 2. You can go ahead and head in.